everybody, welcome back. I hope that you can hear me. I'm outside right now and I'm right by the AC units and everybody has their ACs on right now, but this is unfortunately the only place that I can do this DIY because we're dyeing and bleaching clothes today. And unfortunately, you can't do it on the grass and I can't do it on the pavement in the front because they kind of frown upon that sort of thing. So I'm surrounded by sounds of birds and AC units and probably the occasional scream. I live in New York. What do we have in order of materials? So I have 2 bottles of RIT dye, and I have this. It's a burgundy tie-dye spray. I got this a while ago and I forgot that I had it, and it's kind of the perfect color to match these. This one's violet and this one is eggplant. So I figured that this burgundy would go really, really well. So we have these 3. These bottles here, which we're going to put the dye into. Rubber bands. And this I took from my kitchen. I think it goes to my air fryer. I have a Ninja Foodie. And what you're going to do is you're going to rest the freshly dyed item on top of this. And of course, we can't forget the slips. So we have a few slips, one in navy, one in white, and then another one in black. And then there's this one, which is not a slip. It is a cream dress by Free People. I have this in black already, and I love it. And I saw it with like buy it now of only $10, which if you know Free People stuff, this is a steal. But I don't like the color, so it's gonna get the dye treatment. So I figure may as well kind of throw in a solid dye as well. Full disclosure on the black and the navy, when it comes to the darker colors, I'm gonna have to bleach treat them first in order for them to grab any color. And since they're 100% nylon, I'm not sure how well that's gonna work. I shouldn't damage it in any way. Worst case scenario, it doesn't bleach and it doesn't lift any color at all, and then I'm just still stuck with a black and navy, in which case I could either dye over whatever spots have any issues, or I'm gonna alter them. We're going to massively DIY these slips one way or another. And also, rubber gloves and some clothing that you don't mind getting a little dye or bleach on. This was a skinny puppy t-shirt in its former life that hit the dryer one too many times, and now it's just vague words. Starting off, I'm going to be dipping everything into a bowl of water to dampen them. When the clothing is damp, it helps the dye stick. Ideally, you want to start with clean clothing that's free of residue, because anything that's free of residue is going to ensure a more even color. Any residue on the fabric could lead to splotches in places where the dye doesn't take. Next, I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup of hot water, and you want to make sure that the water is hot to the squeezy bottle with 1/4 of a cup of dye. That's 200 milliliters of water to 50 milliliters of dye. And I'm going to be putting violet and eggplant in separate bottles so that we can create a pattern. It's probably best that you consider better protective measures than I did for your environment. I kind of haphazardly opened a box of canned water and hope for the best. But this dye will stain, so you want to make sure that you protect what you don't want dyed, or do it in a place where it really doesn't matter. I am rinsing my hands in the bowl and allowing the dye to get into the hot water because I plan to use this bowl to soak the white slip and the cream Free People dress. I guess I decided at some point that protecting the bricks was kind of a fruitless task, and instead I'd try to be careful and focus on intense cleanup after I was done.
Now I'm pouring a dilution of the eggplant and the violet into a bowl of hot water to prepare for the full dye. Starting with the cream dress, I submerge it into the water and make sure that it's coated evenly. This bit kind of reminds me of making focaccia, you know, when you dimple the risen dough with olive oil before you bake it. Anyway, I add a little bit more eggplant to deepen the color. I really work the dress into the dye and make sure that it's evenly coated. Ideally, you'd want the water to be hotter than mine was. Mine was boiled in the kettle to start with, and I allowed it to sit in the sun, but prep time kind of brought that temperature down. You don't want it too hot, though. Safety first. And now let's get to the tie-dyeing. I keep wiping my hands on my pants, and the good thing about black clothing is like you wipe almost anything on it and it won't show. I'm going to lay the slip out as symmetrically as I can and the seams all joined. And I'll grab from the center and then slowly start to spin it. Apologies as I begin to kind of twist off camera, but keep spinning and try to tuck back in any pieces that pop out. It's kind of like a metaphor for life. Next, you want to secure the disc of fabric in place by tying the rubber bands around it. Try to do this uniformly. Kind of think of the pattern like the way a pizza pie is cut, creating smaller triangles. When applying the dye, apply it in sections. If you're using more than one color, alternate the colors that you use in each section. Here we have a special moment caught on camera. That red burgundy dye looked surprisingly neon pink in person when I sprayed it. You can see me checking the bottle in disbelief and even applying more in the hope that layering it would deepen the color. It does not. I went over it with the shades of purple. Coat the fabric in sections until no more of the white is visible. I'm heating the fabric to seal in the color. This step I've seen others place in the microwave after covering the garment in cling film, but there's just something about that that I don't like. So I opted for the steamer. Feel free to use the microwave method, it just kind of freaked me out. I wish I remembered to hit record on my camera as I rinsed these items out in the tub, but alas, I did not. You want to wash out the dye in cold water and use dish soap to really get any residual dye out. Once the water runs clear, they're done.
I don't know if you saw, but when I started spraying the red dye, the hesitation and the pause, because I had a moment of shock when it came out this like neon pink, and I immediately threw violet over the top of it. I'm like, yeah, no, not happening. So it did kind of alter the color that I really wanted of the other slip, the tie-dye one, because it kind of added a little bit of magenta in a certain area, but it's actually kind of cute. I like it. It's not bad. Overall, I think like the overall look was really achieved, and I could go over it if I wanted to with black dye, and I might actually attempt that in the future, but I also might keep it the way it is. I don't know. I need to see them when they're dry. Also, it occurred to me that I had these applique bats that I got. I'm going to show you. Got a black one, and then a cream one. So I threw one of the cream ones into the dye as well, because I got these bats because I actually wanted to sew them onto the slips. And I got some other interesting appliques and spider web and spiders and bats because I wanted to DIY broken slips. And I figured, why not see if this one dyes as well? So this one is sat in the dye, and if it comes out, so this one is sat in the dye, and if it comes out properly, I'm gonna sew it to one of the dresses. I think I'm gonna sew it to the black that has the purple contrast stitching on it. Yeah. This was like a mainstay in the 90s when we went to thrift stores, and I'm sure the 80s as well. I didn't actually thrift for goth wear in the 80s. I thrifted for regular clothing because that's where my mom took me a lot of times to get my clothes. But in the 90s, when we went and we picked up slips, it was like the world was our oyster at that point. Like, we had all of these different slips, and we just couldn't wait to dye them all of these different colors. But back then, dyes were so much more temperamental. You had no idea what you were going to end up with. Depending on the fabric, depending upon which way the wind was blowing, the black either had like green undertones or brown undertones, and you'd end up with an entirely different color. So I don't know if anybody else had this problem, but I tended to dye things purple because purple seemed to be the most stable color. And I think that's probably what I defaulted to today as well when I went with my kind of experimentation, because I am so used to purple being like a non-fail. And I'm going to try some other colors as well. I'm going to order some more and see how they turn out, because I still have more white slips that definitely need DIYing. And I'm very excited. I'm looking at my lace bat. Let me see. I'm very excited to see what color this comes out if it actually does dye, because that's going to look really, really nice on the slip. Some good old 90s slip tips. Never just wear underwear and a bra underneath them. You're going to need to layer it with something because they're always somewhat transparent. They're very thin, and what's good about them being thin, it meant that we always layered them. So we could wear like 2 to 4 at a given time because they all had varying lengths, varying trims, and it would create this really interesting kind of contrast between like lace, ruffle, and all of these different lengths. So it looked really interesting. So we'd layer them up, and it was thin enough to where it didn't add bulk. So you could just wear a bunch at the same time. Now that your slips are dyed, you always want to wash them by hand because that color will definitely bleed. You're going to wash it in cold water in your sink because you don't want that color to fade. And there's definitely the opportunity for that to happen. Never use the washing machine, and don't use the dryer. So wash by hand, cold water, air dry. I'm really impressed with the way this one came out. I don't know if you could tell. Hopefully I'll be able to photograph it a little bit, but there's kind of like a burnout pattern on it because it's where like the violet caught and then the eggplant caught in different areas, and then it created this sort of burnout pattern on the lace. It looks really pretty. And then of course we have it gets more eggplant toward the bottom. And then this one is one that I was really impressed with because there's different thread, and the applique itself is made of an entirely different fabric. It means that it kind of came out a little bit of a different color. It came out darker. So I'll show you. The way that the dye catches is really dependent on fabric. So since the fabric of the slip, and then the fabric, of course, of the crinoline, and then the fabric of the applique, and then the fabric of the thread used are entirely different, they're all going to catch in a different way.
Unfortunately, as predicted, the black slip did not bleach. However, the straps and the thread did. So I dipped it in the dye along with the bat applique, and now the slip has contrast purple stitching with a matching bat.